I've been reading in the book of Joshua lately, thinking about it and doing some studying, and I thought I'd just share a few thoughts today about from the book of Joshua chapter 2. It's the story of Rahab. By way of background, the children of Israel had been freed from bondage out of the land of Egypt, and part of God's plan after bringing them out of Egypt was they had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, partially again because of God's plan, but also a lot of it because of the rebelliousness of them and their hard hearts. And now the 40 years were behind them, and they were just at the brink of crossing to the promised land that God had told them about, the land of Canaan. And they were just getting ready to cross over the Jordan. And they had all heard, and they knew exactly what was in store for them as regards to the people that were already there. They knew that there were nations of people there, and they knew that God was giving them this land, but first he had to take care of those people that were there. And they knew what God had said and why he had said that they would have to, what they would have to do to these people. And basically it was pretty clear here that God had told the children of Israel to obliterate these people off the face of the earth. They were simply to be wiped out and utterly destroyed. And the reason for this was kind of twofold. The first part of the reason was that God was punishing these people who lived in the promised land already for their gross sins. We read here in Deuteronomy, going back a book before Joshua, chapter 7, people of Israel, the Lord your God will help you take the land of the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, all these ites. And these 7 nations, God said, have more people and are stronger than Israel, but when you attack them, the Lord will force them out of the land. That was God's part. He promised that. He goes on to say, then you, here's your part, Israel, you must destroy them without mercy. Don't make any peace treaties with them. Don't let your sons and your daughters marry any of them. If you do, God warned them, those people will lead your descendants to worship other gods and to turn their backs on the Lord. And that will make him very angry, and he will quickly destroy Israel. So when you conquer these nations, tear down the altars where they worship their gods. Break up their sacred stones. Cut down the poles that they use in worshiping the goddess Asherah, and throw their idols in the fire. So these people were evil. They were wicked. They were sinful. And another translation of that last verse I just read about the queen, the goddess of Asherah, this translation reads this a little bit differently. It says, here's what you are to do. Tear apart their altars stone by stone, smash their phallic pillars, chop down their sects and religion, Asherah groves, and set fire to their carved god images. So they were very wicked, evil people. Their whole lives were centered around sex and sexual perversion and material riches and gold and so forth. And now the second reason that God was having them do this was to prevent Israel from becoming infected by their evil religions. So it was not only to judge these people for their sins, but to protect his children of Israel. Now, some people might read this and be thinking to themselves, well, wow, God's pretty judgmental here, pretty harsh, maybe even a little bit unfair. And over my lifetime, I've even met some people who have said to me, if the God of the Old Testament and the things I have heard and read and know about that is as cruel as it seems some of these stories portray him as, I want nothing to do with him. And I think that people over the ages have used this as an excuse to stay away from God, to not accept the things of the Lord by claiming that the God of the Old Testament isn't the God that they want to know. And, I remember when I first got saved, I began reading the Bible right away, and I had tons of questions. And right away, I read some of the New Testament, and as I was reading in there, I was reading King James Bible. It was a Schofield Study Bible, and there were little footnotes at the bottom that would explain some of the verses or talk about different things. And one of the questions that seemed to come up was this subject of predestination. And this whole subject of being saved, or how we got saved. And I remember at the time I was a little bit confused because I was wondering to myself about my own recent experience, how I had heard the gospel, I believed it, and then I accepted Christ as my Savior, and the fact that he died for my sins and he was alive now, and I put my trust in that. And as I read that, I began to read these different footnotes, though, and it seemed to me that some people, this was teaching that some people believed that God chose you or predestined or planned ahead for you to be saved, and other people he didn't choose. And it seemed to me that if you're one of the chosen, you're okay, but if you weren't, you're just out of luck. So I asked my pastor, the man who led me to the Lord, and he patiently explained to me in a way that I could understand something real simple. And he explained the fact that Christ died for everyone, for God so loved the world, and that included everyone, and that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And so that even though this teaching was out there, that God did love everyone, he died for everyone, Christ paid for everyone's sins, and whosoever, that included me, believed should not perish. And so that was pretty much resolved the issue for me. But then one thing he said, kind of like an afterthought, he said, Mike, what if God did choose some people to be saved and others he didn't? And I thought, well, you just said he didn't. He said, well, what if he did? He said, you know what? There wouldn't be much we could do about it anyway. After all, he's God, isn't he? And he's almighty and he's all-powerful. Well, that threw me back for a minute. But then later, as I got to know God better, realizing that not only was he a God who was almighty and all-powerful and hated and judged sin, but he was also a God who was all-loving, and he was merciful and kind, and he had provided a way of salvation. So here in the story in Joshua chapter 2, we have the story of God judging sin. And he was choosing that these people should be wiped off and killed. But there's also the story of Rahab. And she was one of them. She was one of these people whom God had said to destroy and to utterly wipe off the face of the earth. But she was one who had believed and trusted in God himself. And so I love the Old Testament for this thing. The New Testament has these teachings and doctrines laid out for us. But the Old Testament, God gives us stories that illustrate through the lives of people and God's intervention and God's involvement in their lives how these doctrines and teachings really work out. And so not only do we have God's judgment in Joshua chapter 2 on the inhabitants of Jericho, but we have God's love and mercy and honoring of one person's faith who did believe him. And we read here in Joshua 2, Joshua the son of Nun sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, go look over the land and even Jericho. So these 2 spies went. They came to Rahab's house. I think God's providence led them there. And then the king, he was really the mayor of Jericho, he was told about it. And he said, well, behold, he was told that these men from Israel, 2 men have come in, spies, and they're trying to find out search out the country. So he sent word to Rahab's house saying, bring those men to me. And so Rahab said, the 2 men that came to them, she had hid them. And she said, 2 men did come to me, but when it got dark and at the time of shutting the gate, they left the city. So if you just go on out, you'll find them out there. And so all the king's men who were after them went looking for them. But then Rahab went upstairs to where she had hid them on the roof. She had flax laid up there, and she said, had hid them there. And she says, the men, she said, let me find it here. Oh, she said to the men, I know that Jehovah has given you the land, and that your terror has fallen on us, and that all those who live in the land faint because of you. Everybody's afraid of you. We've heard about what went on. She said, we've heard how Jehovah dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of Jordan, that's Sihon and Og, and that you utterly destroyed them. And when we heard it, our hearts melted. Everybody in this whole town was terrified, and said, nor did any more spirit remain in any man because of you. For Jehovah, your God, he is God in heaven above and in earth beneath. And she made a deal with them that because she was kind to them and helped them out, would they save her when they came to destroy the city. And so we do have that story there. And by the way, we'll get into that later on in another study where God did save Rahab. But I thought, what's the practical teaching here? And the only thing I came up with basically was this, that how great it is that God gives us a story like this, where not only does he show us the main story of his judgment on sin, but he thought enough to add the little story of one woman, Rahab the harlot. And we read about her in Hebrews 11, by faith the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe when she had received the spies with peace. See, it wasn't what she did, the fact that she lied or she hid the men, that she was saved. It was because she didn't perish with those who did not believe, meaning she did believe in the one true God and acknowledge that he was God of all. And so there is an example of one of the heroes of faith, an unlikely one, Rahab the harlot, but one for us to read and be encouraged by. Thanks.